Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I'll be diving back into the 62 GMC C1000 build. Video-wise, this project has been on hold for a couple of months as the bodywork end of things ended up being way more intense than originally thought. So while I tackled other projects and kept up with my reviews, my friend Joe has been knee-deep in the cosmetics of the truck. Of course, I'll have some content coming out on that in the near future, so keep an eye out. The focus for this video will be on building the frame. I want to get it as close to a complete rolling chassis as possible so we can then mount the body and prep for paint. Like I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, I had the frame media blasted and powder coated. Now all that's left is rebuilding the rest of the suspension components, some cleaning, some painting, and a whole lot of reassembly. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco for sponsoring this build. The main goal of building this truck the way I have is not simply the fact that I love the concept behind restomodding a classic vehicle, but I wanted to build it to where it's easy to live with. Plus, by doing the vast majority of the fabrication work myself, I was able to significantly cut down the costs of building this truck. By using as many factory-backed parts as possible, this truck will be the best of both worlds. It'll have the classic looks inside and out, but also the reliability and improved drivability of a late model truck. As far as serviceability is concerned, you'd be able to go to any GM Genuine Parts or AC Delco distributor to easily get parts or even take it to a GM dealership to have work done on it. Because at the end of the day, we're not dealing with 1962 underpinnings anymore. It's a combination of square body Chevy and LS parts, which are plentiful to say the least. This has been an incredibly fun and rewarding journey so far. It hasn't been without its difficulties being such a fabrication-intensive project, but I've learned a ton and I'm so thankful for it. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm getting close, but there's still more work to do, so if you haven't subscribed already, I definitely encourage you to do so and make sure your notifications are turned on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So in case you guys didn't know, a GMC C1000 is basically the same thing as a Chevrolet C10. The most complicated part of this build by a long shot was figuring out how to take a 1962 body and mount it to a 1974 frame. The frame is a short bed C10 frame. The GMC was originally a long bed truck, so the GMC unfortunately ended up being a lot more rotten. That's why the bodywork has taken so much longer than expected. But the bed, or the original GMC bed, was toast. It was rotten beyond belief. Plus it had all sorts of other modifications done to it. It was just gone. It wasn't worth fooling with. So, being that I had access to the 74 short bed frame, I was like, forget it. I just ordered all new parts to build a brand new step side short bed for the GMC. The GMC was also a short bed originally, so trying to keep with the theme here. A lot of stuff has happened and changed and flip-flopped and all that stuff, but obviously it turned out really, really good. But one of the caveats to using a square body Chevy frame with this body style truck is the difference in cab height, or the difference in how the frame is shaped. So naturally, depending on how far you actually want to cut the cab and set the cab over the frame, it's basically going to give the body like a body lift. So I ended up countering that with installing lowering components in the front and rear. So technically the front has about a 4.5 inch drop, the rear has about a 6-inch drop, which gave the truck a relatively stock-ish C10 stance, maybe a little bit lower. We're going to end up installing 22-inch wheels on the truck with some decent tires, so it's going to have a nice stance on it. Not overly low, definitely not slammed, nice and tasteful. That's kind of what we're going with here. The original fuel tank for the 62 would have originally been inside the cab behind the seat. We got rid of that in favor of a custom underbed tank, so the filler neck will come up through the bed floor and it gets the fuel out of the cab. It also allows more opportunities to maybe do some custom audio work, and definitely allows more adjustment for the seat. So all in all, it'll be safer, more comfortable, all good things. far as a little recap on the motor, I pulled it from a wrecked 2004 two-wheel drive Cadillac Escalade. It's a 5.3 liter LM7 V8, LS-based truck motor. It's got a 4L60E automatic transmission. It ran and drove phenomenal. All I did basically was just give it a thorough refresh, tore everything down to the short block, replaced all the gaskets, cleaned everything up, repainted, installed all new sensors and components. This thing looks awesome. And in case anybody was wondering why the motor is painted all red, the 305 cubic inch V6 that originally powered the 62 GMC, or at least our truck, was painted red from the factory. So that was kind of my little way to pay homage to the original motor and just give it a bit more of a classic look, so to speak. But yeah, obviously fits really well within this frame. It's really easy to LS swap a square body truck, and we ended up doing a lot of custom work to the firewall of the 62 just to clean a lot of stuff up and to make the firewall smooth a little bit better with just where the engine was mounted and whatnot. I'll explain all that stuff in the next video. There's just so much work that's gone into this truck. With all of the freshly rebuilt and new suspension components installed in the front, it was time to redirect attention back to the rear, because I didn't want to just clean up the rear end and send it, so to speak. This is a prime time, like with everything blown apart. It's so easy to access the most basic of serviceable components, so it would be silly not to do as much as I can while I can. So that being said, in addition to completely rebuilding the drum brakes, I wanted to service the rear end itself, change the axle bearings, the axle seals, the differential seal, of course put new fluid in it, and just generally check everything to make sure it looked good. So yeah, it was an involved process that probably took about a day's worth of work, but man, it turned out good. ended up having a bit of a crisis when it came to the brakes. I thought I double and triple checked this, but apparently I oversaw something. I thought this 74 C10 donor had the optional heavy-duty brake package, which had thicker rotors in the front and wider drums in the rear with wider shoes, but apparently it does not, because when I started putting the drums together back there, nothing was fitting right. And you might be able to get different backing plates and wheel cylinders and convert it over, but I had already completely finished the rear end at that time, and I was not about to take that back apart. So, this truck has a combination of the heavy-duty brakes in the front and the standard brakes in the rear. Fortunately, I was able to run down to my local GM dealer and actually give them the VIN number to make sure that I get the right stuff that I needed. So, thankfully, it wasn't a total loss, and if anything, get a little bit of an upgrade in the front because I had ordered drop spindles for the heavy-duty brakes. So, all of the heavy-duty components that I had gotten for the front just bolted on just fine. It was all good. So again, not a total loss. It's just one of those things. You're bound to run into something stupid when working on a project. That's just how it goes sometimes. But it ended up working out good. One pretty cool thing to know about lowering square body GM trucks is that depending on how low you are wanting to go or what combination of lowering components you are using, you can actually get away with getting shock relocation brackets, which instead of having to get some aftermarket shocks that were shorter in length or trying to figure out all that stuff, you can just use factory shocks, which is fantastic, and again adds to the goal of having things easily serviceable and whatnot. So the front relocation brackets I welded to the top of the frame rail. The rears just basically extend the perches on the bottoms of the axle tube. So really easy. And in this whole process, I ended up upgrading to AC Delco adjustable air shocks, just for convenience, and if anybody decides to haul anything in this, they can account for it with the, adjusting the ride height. So I'm happy with how it worked out. At this point, I've got the frame where it needs to be, so I can move on to the next step, which is getting the cab mounted back on for the last time. I am stoked about this. I know I've said, I'm super excited or, whatever a lot in this series, but it's just been a cool process. But specifically in this moment, I have a lot less parts on my floors and my shelves, and it's all put together on this beautiful rolling chassis, which is phenomenal. So at this point, I've got a lot of little final nitpicky things that I have to do to the frame. I've got installed grease fittings, tighten things, blah, blah, blah. Some of the bigger things, I've got to plumb the fuel system, install the brake lines. I got to figure out my drive shaft, but I'll do that later on once the whole truck is put together, so I make sure to get my measurements right, unless I can actually use the 74 drive shaft, which I don't know yet. There's still things to figure out at this point. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to leave a like down below because it really helps the videos a lot. A big thanks once again to GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco for sponsoring this series. Check out gmparts.com. That's where you can input your vehicle and check out what parts they offer for it, find retailers, find service centers, and more. As always, be sure to support the brands that support the channel. It really means a lot. And again, if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so because there's not only more GMC content, but there's a lot of other cool content on the channel as well. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.